thank you everyone for having me. It's been really, really amazing, and it's great to meet you all. You did a wonderful job of introducing me, so I won't talk too much about it. But yeah, just a little bit more on Tuulee or Tuulee. You can say it how you want. The consultancy is really based on the idea of transparency and action. It's a Finnish word that means the wind is blowing, and it's all about creating that movement and that kind of change that we all need to see, both in purpose and in sustainability. But enough about me. This is really about us and celebrating what we've heard over the last few days. Because I don't know whether any of you agree or have felt something similar, but in the last few weeks, I felt a bit of a post-COP blues, or maybe it's a COVID blues, or the winter in Europe blues. I don't know what it's been, but it's been quite hard to find that fire and that energy sometimes. But these last few days have really given that back to me. So thank you to everyone and the amazing things that we've heard. And I do want to give a special shout out to all the speakers, but also to HMD and Business of Purpose and the backstage crew. It's been phenomenal, so professional. Really, really, you smashed it. So thank you for that. But this community is really about inspiring one another and what we can actually do to make and create that better future that we all believe in. And that's what I'm here to do today, to light, hopefully, some fires for you guys in your hearts and minds of how you might be able to put purpose into practice. What that might look like for you, for your teams, you as an employer, you as a business and a brand. Because we all have to keep moving and faster and in the same direction if we're going to make that progress that we desperately need. So I'm not going to spend any time today convincing you on why you should be doing this. I think the previous speakers have done a phenomenal job. But this is really about what you could do. What is it to put purpose into practice? I want to give you practical and tangible examples of the kinds of things that you could start thinking about. Now, it goes without saying that because I'm going in quite detailed, they're only going to cover a small sliver of purpose, and not everything is going to be totally relevant to you or your business and brand. But I hope that everyone is going to be able to take at least one thing that makes them feel like they can do something. And I think the important thing for me is that a company's purpose, that's not owned by a CEO or a C-suite or a marketing director. A company's purpose is owned by the people who make up that company, and how they make that, how they put that into practice, and what they do every single day that allows the collective to build up and lead on purpose. And I think putting purpose into practice, I think the word practice is quite important here. It's not something that you do one-off. It's going to be harder. It's going to take regularity, consistency. You need to keep going at it. You're not going to succeed every time. But it's really about changing your entire mindset that then allows us to tackle some of those bigger systemic issues that we've heard of from the other speakers today. And it's hard and it takes effort. It's practice. And they're very rarely the easier route. They often ask for a heightened personal, emotional commitment, and that can be tiring too. But I guess that's what gives you your personal fulfillment at the end of the day. And that's what makes you feel like it's worth doing what it is that you do, whatever your role in your organization is. So my dream is that at the end of this talk, maybe this evening, maybe tomorrow morning, you'll be able to look at the presentation. It's on the Explore section, and sit down and think, okay, I might be able to start on one of these, just one. And it's a start. Like I said, you're probably not going to be able to achieve it in one day, but hopefully this really gives you a little bit of an idea of how to put purpose into practice, at least from my point of view. And so for this, I'd love to pull up some slides that will help me go through the points today. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to look at first what could be done as an employee and an employer and a brand against 3 different subtopics, which are just small examples of topics that might be part of your purpose or your company's purpose, and start looking, and we're going to get to this grid of 9 actions by the end. But just before I dive into that, the one thing I want everyone to have in the back of your minds that I keep going through this is this idea of the 3.5% rule. For those of you who haven't heard of it, it's from Erica Chenoweth, who's a political scientist at Harvard University. And she came up with this theory that you only need 3.5% of a given population who are actively participating for that change to happen. Now, most of her research was for political movements, but it's absolutely something that we can take into our purpose movements as well. It's actually, in fact, it's what Extinction Rebellion use in order to try and get that collective change that they're fighting for. So I think the reason I wanted to mention this now is that if you start thinking about your company or your business or your community, how many people would be 3.5% of that community, and can you mobilize them to kind of advocate for change with you to put purpose into practice? So I think it'd be great if everyone can just keep in mind that 3.5% as we keep going through these, and just remember that you can do it, you can find those people. So the first kind of sliver of purpose as such that I'm going to look at, that we've also heard about today in a couple of the sessions, is transparency, and how important that is to drive the sustainability and the purpose movements. So what might transparency look like for an employee? It's probably not the sexiest place to start a presentation, but really looking at your pension and how can you make your pension more transparent. This is obviously focused on the UK, this slide, but if we know that there's 2.6 trillion pounds invested in UK pensions, and a lot of that money is investing in harmful industries, then how could you actually create change, and how could you make your money matter? And that's exactly what this organization here, Make My Money Matter, does. They help people to green their pensions. And they say that greening your pension is 21 times more effective at reducing your carbon footprint than giving up flying, going veggie, and switching energy provider combined. Now, I'd love to dive into some of the details of that calculation, but it's really important for us to be thinking about, well, if you're really a purpose-led individual, then do you know what your pension is investing in? And in fact, also, could you become an advocate inside your organization to change what the kind of standard pension is that your company invests in? That's a huge amount of difference that you could make as an individual, and something you could start tomorrow. What about transparency as an employer? And this is a controversial issue, but transparent pay is absolutely something that I advocate for, as do many others. Because whether the pay gap that you're talking about is the gender pay gap, socioeconomic pay gap, or racial pay gap, there is a pay gap that exists, and it remains stubbornly high, whichever market you're in. And transparent pay, understanding what others are being paid for the same job that you are doing, just allows that kind of, well, I guess, a level playing field. Now, it's not going to work for everyone, and you have to actually act on transparent pay. You can't just tell people and they've discovered that they're being paid less. You have to actually then do something to fix it. So it's not an easy fix by no means. It's complicated. It will require investment. But if you're serious about socioeconomic or gender equity in your business, then you really should be looking at transparent pay and what you could be doing to facilitate that. By the way, within this presentation, every slide that I talk about, there's something hyperlinked as a resource that you can go, whether it's read an article or visit a website, so you can actually see for yourself how you can make a difference. And then what about for your brand? And I think transparency strategy is something that needs to be talked about more and more when we talk about brand purpose and what that means. Because you need to figure out, as a brand, first of all, what is it that you want to be transparent about? Because of course you can't be transparent about everything. It's going to be boring for consumers or not the right information. You need to identify what it is that your consumers really care about, and then start moving towards becoming more transparent. Now, whether it's working with an organization like Provenance, who use blockchain technology to allow your products to actually have transparency rooted in the very core of them, or someone like Corn, who use the carbon footprint labeling on their packets to differentiate themselves from their competitors. And finally, being based in Amsterdam, I can't do a presentation without mentioning Tony's Chocolonely, who've just released their most recent Transparency Fair report on the impact of their product on the people who make it, the supply chain, as well as closer to home. This kind of transparency strategy and making sure that that's built into your purpose strategy is critical for brands going forward. So what about moving away from transparency, which is a huge topic in and of itself, but those are just some key elements. What if we start looking at something like climate action? Because again, this is a huge topic and climate action covers a huge amount. But I think one of the things that we need to be thinking about is that if we're really going to be accelerating the sustainability and purpose movements, we need to make sure that people feel like they know what they can do when it comes to climate action. And so as an employee, something that you could do immediately is to think about how could I become an SDG champion within my organization? So you could, an SDG champion is essentially looking at the SDGs here on the right and deciding, well, which of these is most relevant for me? What is it that really makes me feel kind of like I want to invest my time into making a difference? And you can start really delving into what are the actions that you could be doing, advocating for within your organization that would align with that SDG. Because I think the point is that if you try and do everything, it just becomes so hopelessly heavy. And so trying to figure out, well, if gender equality is going to be my fight, then well, how can I make a difference on that? Or if it's going to be on life below water, what is it that depends obviously on your business and your organization, but how could I be making a difference? And there's some amazing, the SDG Compass, for example, gives some amazing resources that really allow you to dig into not only is it what business should be doing to impact these SDGs, but how you can measure the difference that you're making. As an employer, I think on something like climate action and putting purpose into practice is enabling action from your employees. I think it's just that people assume that employees should just kind of know what they should do that aligns with this purpose. I think that's asking for too much. I think employers should be helping and supporting and enabling their people to make that difference by whether that's setting up a program that really makes it very clear, that asks employees to do something. It could be something as simple as joining Count Us In, which is a UK-based organization, although they have global partnerships, which brings together a huge number of massive businesses as well as smaller ones. And together they can start tracking how their people are making a difference against certain specific steps that are meant to mitigate the climate emergency. But you might also be able to build something for your own people that's bespoke. Good Up, for example, here in Amsterdam, they create these purpose-driven business platforms where you can start not only inspiring your people on what they could be doing, but also collecting that data so that you can start figuring, well, what is our collective impact? I think seeing what your colleagues are doing and what a difference your actions are making is hugely important. And I think something that more and more employees are going to be demanding as time goes on. And then what about as a brand? And I think here this could be a number of things that brand could be doing to put purpose into practice on climate action. But I think from my point of view, where we have to start is measure, measure, measure. And this might actually link back to one of the workshops on greenwashing, which is really about, well, measuring sustainability and how you can make sure that you don't greenwash. And I think that's really, really critical, because you can't improve what you don't measure. If you don't know where you are, then you don't know where to go. And I think that that's really important for brands to understand, that you need to have this information. You need to go and figure out, well, how am I gonna get this information? And there's on the right-hand side, I've listed a number of different areas that you can start thinking about. And some of this will be measured already, perhaps by your sustainability team, but perhaps the teams haven't talked specifically about it, or it might be at a local level. But you need to go and find that information and figure out, well, what role does this play really for my brand? And how can I make sure that I'm actually enabling people to put purpose into practice? And I think if you look at, for example, on the right, there's obviously carbon footprint, something that you'd hope most organizations are moving to start measuring. But you could also think about specifics to whatever vertical it is that you're in. And so, for example, what about marketing waste materials? So have you thought about, if you ordered a gazillion leaflets, where do they go? Was that necessary? What's the impact of having had that many leaflets printed, all the way through to thinking about point of sale materials? There's huge amounts of areas where we just forget to measure what our impact is. And if you don't measure it, then you don't know how to improve it. And I think that's really critical for brands to be putting purpose into action rather than just talking about it. And in the last 10 minutes, I'd like to talk to you about how you might be able to put purpose into practice when it comes to the inclusion of women. And I think before I begin on this section, it goes without saying that women are a massive group, and not everyone is going to have the same lived experiences. Indeed, mine are very different from others. And so when we talk about inclusion of women that already can be slightly problematic, I would always recommend that you start thinking about what group of women and the intersectionalities that are part and parcel of this, and so that you can make sure that they're included. Nonetheless, for today, I've kept it at a higher level just to make sure that it's clear for everyone on what you could be doing. So the first thing is, and perhaps this is a little unfairly aimed at some of the men in the audience, but is really about how you can be an active ally. Because active allyship, actually, I think I love reading this, that stop thinking of ally as a noun. Being an ally isn't a status. And then it goes on to say that actually allyship should be a verb. It is very much something you do. You don't declare yourself an ally and therefore you are one. You go and actively are and take the action that you need to be an ally to women. Because it's been shown over and over again that that's one of the biggest ways to make sure that women are included and get those opportunities in your organization. And so if you are able as an individual to act as a better ally to the women in your life, and of course this also stretches to not just being a better ally to women, this also stretches to being a better ally to other ethnicities, sexualities, abilities, to all people. Being a better ally is key. And Harvard Business Review and Berkeley University, who are the two that you see here on the right, have written amazing articles on exactly that. Very practical steps on how you could be a better ally to the people in your organization so that you can actually make a difference. And if you really genuinely believe in social equity, then this is something that you could be doing as of tomorrow. And then a very different kind of topic. I think as an employer, and if you're really thinking about inclusion of women, although of course, again, this might also be a topic that's relevant to men, but just focusing on women for now, something that you might look into, that you might be able to do immediately or in the short term, is support for domestic abuse victims. I've heard too many people say that domestic abuse is not something that happens in my organization. I would know about it, I would see it, but it's something that has absolutely risen in numbers, and shockingly so, especially during COVID. And I think that employers have a really unique role where they might be able to actually help some of those people get out of those incredibly toxic and dangerous situations. It was in domestic violence support charity called Refuge. They reported a 700% increase in visits to its National Domestic Abuse Helpline website during the initial lockdown between April and June 2020. And that has been fluctuating and going up and down. And we're still very much living through that, since people are still very much stuck at home due to COVID. And I think something that Unilever as an employer in this, what they did was amazing. Not only did they initiate a global domestic violence and abuse policy, but they made it publicly available for any other company to also be able to steal with pride and use and initiate and put into practice straight away. Again, the link will take you immediately to that policy so that you could take that to your HR team. And essentially, it's about giving women or whoever is suffering from domestic abuse the opportunity, both financial as well as time, to be able to leave that situation and to have a safety net that will look after you. I think as an employer, that is an incredibly powerful way to show how you're putting purpose into practice when it comes to really looking after your own people, and especially women. And then finally, again, shifting quite a bit, but how can you as a brand really be thinking about the inclusion of women? And something that I advocate for and work with many clients on is inclusive marketing. And it really stems from this fact that I hear a lot of the time people say, oh, we're kind of done with gender equality, like how women are perceived in the world. We've achieved that, right? And we simply haven't. There's an amazing study here again from the UN Women from 2019 where they did a global gender equality attitudes study. And in this study, they found, and these are respondents globally, men and women, but a couple of the highlights include that 31% of people think it is appropriate for men to discuss a female colleague's appearance at work. 28% think that a woman should not earn more than her husband. And 41% think that when a mother works, the children suffer. And I think that this just goes to show that we are not living in a world where women are seen as equal to men. And I think that the role of marketing and advertising and storytelling is hugely powerful in creating that change that we need to see. We spend, brands and businesses spend incredible amounts of money to make sure that people see their advertising. So how are you showing your people? How are you showing women in your advertising? And that's the kind of essence of inclusive marketing. And someone like the Unstereotype Alliance has done an amazing job in bringing together businesses on fighting those stereotypes, those harmful stereotypes. So you might be thinking about whether it is how many women you show in your advertising as a brand, or perhaps it's about how you show them. Are they funny? Are they the ones in the job? Are they the lead character? Or indeed, you might start thinking about, well, who actually filmed this? Who was behind the camera? From what perspective is this story being told? We need to shift attitudes globally about gender. And I think as marketeers and as brands, we have a huge opportunity and indeed responsibility to make a difference. And the WFA have created a creative process guidelines to try and find those potential areas for bias where you could be talking with your teams, with your agencies, with your partners, and try and figure out where are the potential areas of bias and how can we make sure that those don't creep into our brand and our marketing. And so to finish up, I hope that this grid of 9, that, as I said, by the end of this, whether it's today or tomorrow morning, you might be able to take one of these and think, how can I put purpose into practice myself straight away? What can I start? Who can I talk to? How can I drive this forward? Because to that point I said earlier, a company's purpose is not owned by the C-suite, it is owned by the people who work there. And I think to finish off, I'd like to read you a quote from Dr. Jane Goodall, who always continues to inspire me, and I think is very relevant for everything that we've heard today. She said, "If you think globally, you become filled with gloom. But if you take a little piece of this whole picture, my piece, our piece, this is what I can do here. I'm making a difference here. And they're making a difference over there. And they're making a difference over there. And so are they. Gradually, the pieces get filled in. And the world is a better place because of you." And so with that, thank you very much.